Welcome back to my individual episode reviews of the first chapter of the War for Cybertron trilogy. Today, we're taking a look at Siege Episode 3. We begin this episode with Ratchet searching the battlefield from the previous one, presumably looking for injured Transformers to help, or maybe to salvage parts from the ones he can't. He ends up finding Impactor under some rubble. These two probably have some of the more interesting dynamics in this show, but we'll touch on that later. After the intro, we see Optimus, Alita, and Prowl walking down a hall. And I can't help but find it funny how Alita is taller than Prowl. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look at some of the other footage to confirm, but I think Prowl is the same height as most of the other Autobots like Sideswipe and Wheeljack. If so, then I guess that means that they made Alita taller so that she'd be more in line with Optimus's height, who's even taller than her. So it's like Prowl is a tall, Alita is a grande, and Optimus is a venti. Wheeljack mentions how he knows someone who might be able to help them repair the space bridge, Ratchet. Obviously, this is a reference to how Ratchet and Wheeljack often work together in G1, whether it was building the Dinobots or just repairing the Autobots. But it's weird. Wheeljack was the scientist and Ratchet was the doctor. If anyone could fix the space bridge, I'd think it would be Jackie. But I guess they needed an excuse for why Wheeljack couldn't just fix it himself, as well as a reason to go see Ratchet. And I guess they couldn't use Perceptor, who would have been the next logical choice, because he doesn't have a siege toy. Also, as we'll see later on, I wonder if Ratchet and Wheeljack have some history together. Specifically, some romantic history. Seriously, the way that Wheeljack says that he knows someone who could help, it sounds like he's talking about an old ex-boyfriend.
Normally I'd say that kind of tech is beyond me, but I know an expert who's great at putting things back together.
Especially since when we meet him later on, they really seem like they're a couple who went through a bad breakup.
Ratchet, can you just listen to what he has to say before we leave?
We see Mirage using his holograms to disguise himself as a Decepticon, which explains that Walmart exclusive figure of him. It's still weird how they gave Mirage Hound's holograms in this show. Why couldn't they just give him his invisibility? Surely they could do the same things with that ability as they do with his holograms. Or maybe they could have had Hound projecting his holograms onto Mirage or something like that. Oh well. It's also weird how Mirage's holograms are more than just an illusion. They actually have substance. They can take a hit, and their weapons actually seem to do damage. When we finally see the Autobots meet Ratchet, it really does seem like he and Wheeljack have some history together. Aw, they're so cute together. Too bad it didn't work out. The way they talk about Ratchet and his inventions here, it really does sound like Wheeljack and Ratchet's roles were swapped. Because in the G1 cartoon and Cyberverse, it was Wheeljack who was always inventing crazy gadgets and weapons and stuff. But as they go on, they kind of make it sound like Ratchet is sort of the Tony Stark of Transformers. Former weapons designer who is now trying to save lives instead of thinking up new ways to end them. We are then introduced to Ratchet's new boyfriend, Impactor. And with a name like Impactor, bet we know who... you know what? I better not go there. I mean, this video is already probably going to get demonetized by Hasbro and Netflix. I don't want to get flagged for mature discussions or anything like that. I will say that it's weird how Impactor is straight up a Decepticon in this series, when in the past he's always been an Autobot. And in this show, he does kind of betray the Decepticons, but he doesn't really join the Autobots. More like he just wants to help Ratchet. And again, sorry to harp on this every episode, but it's so annoying how the generic random Autobots and Decepticons don't look as different as they could be. I mean, they didn't even try switching their factions. Like, why couldn't one of these Sideswipe clones be a Decepticon? Or why not make this Seeker in Aerobot's colors? And speaking of these Sideswipe clones, didn't we see them in Red Alert's medbay in the first episode? Man, these guys either have some really bad luck and are always getting hurt, or maybe Rooster Teeth is just lazy and reused the same character models.
Pull the trigger. You have too much honor to shoot someone in the back. You should have taken the shot. You could have ended the war.
I agree with Megatron. Ultra Magnus should have taken the shot. It would have made him a far more interesting character if he was willing to sacrifice his honor for the sake of ending the war. I think it would have inspired Jetfire to do the same. After all, in film and TV, there's a rule: show, don't tell. This is a visual medium. It's always better to show action, show character development, show drama, not just talk about it. Which seems to be a rule that this show has decided to go against for all the talking that they do. It would have been much more impactful for Jetfire to see Ultra Magnus sacrifice his honor to try and end the war, rather than just having Megatron feed him the line,
Let that be a lesson to us both. Always take the shot. Understood.
I mean, this is one of the things that's wrong with this show. We knew before even watching this series that Jetfire was eventually going to switch sides because that's who Jetfire is. We've seen G1. We know in Fire in the Sky that Jetfire starts off a Decepticon, but then becomes an Autobot. And when I watched this show for the first time, that was literally all I was waiting for. I knew it was coming because that's what I expected. But along the way, there wasn't really any good motivation for him to switch. Especially not up until this point. It's like, what, Starscream is gunning for his job? Okay, well, if you're really a Decepticon, execute the traitor and be done with him. But no, of course, we can't do that because this is a pre-G1 story, and Starscream has to make it to Earth and stuff. So he can't kill Starscream. Especially not when he has an Earthrise toy and a Kingdom toy coming out in the future. So Starscream is safe. What other motivations for changing allegiances does Jetfire have? Shockwave's plan to reformat the Autobots into Decepticons?
It would be a victory without honor.
Well, think of it this way. Would it really be less honorable to turn the Autobots into Decepticons, thus saving their lives, versus continuing the war and fighting and losing Transformers on both sides? Wouldn't it be better to conserve life rather than extending the war until one side's numbers are exhausted? Wasn't there a similar argument behind dropping the atomic bombs in World War II?
It'll shorten the war by 5 years and save millions of lives.
Annihilation of an entire race shouldn't be the price of peace.
Although I'm sure the Autobots would say the heroic thing of that they'd rather die than become Decepticon slaves. But would they really be slaves? I mean, as we see with Jetfire and Impactor, they're Decepticons, but they chose to go against their own side. Would the reformatted Autobots also not be capable of making that choice? And if they truly were turned into slaves with no free will of their own, wouldn't that be pretty hypocritical of Megatron? Isn't that what he was fighting against in the first place?
Don't become like those we rose against.
Too bad they don't explore this more in this show. Seriously, all they had to do was have Megatron argue with Ultra Magnus that his plan is more merciful and that the ends justify the means. It would have made Megatron and this whole show far more interesting if they actually got into the morality of their actions rather than just talking about pointless stuff. Well, anyways, moving away from that ethical debate, when Impactor says that he's sworn an oath to himself to protect the people of Cybertron, this reminds me of how in Beast Machines, Obsidian and Strika swore a similar oath to protect Cybertron, and since Megatron was Cybertron, that meant they were loyal to him. That's why they weren't brainwashed and given new personalities like his previous Viacon generals. And we end this episode with Jetfire officially betraying Skywarp and the Decepticons by shooting him in the back, just like how Ultra Magnus should have done with Megatron. And apparently, at least according to Starscream in the next episode, Skywarp died of his injury, even though in the last episode we saw Cog get a huge hole blasted through him and he turned out fine. Seriously, I kept expecting Skywarp to show up later in this series and be like, "Surprise, I'm not dead. We just made you think I was dead because... surprise?" Oh well, he does have an Earthrise toy, so who knows. Maybe he'll come back in the next chapter and they'll explain it then. Or maybe they'll have a new Skywarp. Like Starscream and Thundercracker just take one of the other random Seekers and forcibly repaint him and rename him Skywarp and say, "You're one of us now," and act like he's the old Skywarp. That would be pretty funny. He'd be like, seriously guys, I'm flattered that you want me to join your group, but my name's Novastorm, and I...
Ha ha ha. You're so funny, Skywarp. Always joking. Remember that one you told us about the Petro Rabbits?
So, I think that does it for this episode. The Autobots recruit Ratchet and his new boyfriend Impactor to help them fix the space bridge. The Decepticons discover where the Autobots are hiding, and Jetfire officially betrays the Decepticons. Overall, I think this episode was better than the last two. I almost want to say it was good. I do wish they had done a few things differently, but oh well. That's what you get for not hiring me, Rooster Teeth. What about you? What did you think of episode 3 of Siege? As always, let me know down in the comments. Remember to like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that fun stuff. And I'll see you back here tomorrow for episode 4 of the War for Cybertron trilogy.